that job than her. Last year, we passed Senate Bill 137 unanimously through both the House and the Senate, creating this office, which was created for a child liaison office, reviewing agency policies to safeguard children's rights, welfare, and safety, reviewing policies and procedures for the placements of children with special needs, and reporting conditions of confinement of youth held in secure detention facilities, and conducting programs to ensure that their education was always done precisely and correctly. Because of that, I know that Louisiana is one of 38 states that currently has some type of an ombudsman office to ensure that our children's rights are safeguarded. But many of you may remember how we got here. I formerly served as the chair of the Select Committee on Women and Children. And we had many hearings regarding the Department of Children and Family Services, regarding the Office of Juvenile Justice. And there were two, at the time when we really considered doing this legislation, there were two things that happened almost simultaneously. One was the sex trafficking case that was happening in Livingston Parish with a young lady, and we're just going to use her initials, KM. And we found that the system had failed that young lady. There had been reports that had been made to the Office of the Department of Children and Family Services. There had been an investigation, but yet no action had been taken, and this young lady had been trafficked. Then secondly, almost within 3 weeks apart, there were two babies who died in my district specifically from fentanyl. Come to find out, there had been reports made about actions that were happening in the family, and no action had been taken, or prompt action had been taken, because there seemed to have been some level of investigation, but there was supposed to be follow-up that did not occur timely, and unfortunately, those two babies lost their life. Both of them were 2 years old. So those actions, along with other things that were happening almost at the same time, prompted all of us, and I'll say all of us, myself along with my colleagues, to look at what was happening in the Department of Children and Family Services, as well as Office of Juvenile Justice, to ensure that we would not continue to fail our children. The plight of children today in Louisiana is a lot different than when we grew up. There are many factors that families are contending with. Drugs being a premier epidemic that's happening in our community. And unfortunately, way too many young people not having sometimes correct guidance or the guidance that is necessary, are having children way too young, and then experiencing drugs. And what we found in many of the cases that some of the young people didn't even know some of these drugs was even laced with fentanyl, which is a whole nother topic within itself and a conversation we can have for another day. But we have to begin to address some of the root causes, and that is poverty. That is definitely driving a lot of these other factors. And so because of that, we have been able to create this office, and Judge Richey has been doing a phenomenal job in terms of bridging the gap, getting the information, ensuring that our children have a voice, making sure that families also have a voice. But what we have ran into, which she would be able to elaborate on a little bit more, is some of the, I guess I would say some of the conflicts or some of the issues that she ran into in terms of being able to access information. So because she was not able to access information, or because we did not write that in the law, we are now having to go back and to actually address it so that we can give her the tools that she needs so that she can effectively be able to continue to help so many of our young people. One of the things that I must share before she comes up, which lets me know that we have the right person in the job, is a case of a young lady who I think was or is 18, And somehow she got in touch with the judge, and she shared that what she wanted was to be a part of a family. She wanted to be adopted. She wanted someone to say, we accept you and we love you. And it had not happened. So now she's 16, and she kept thinking, what is wrong with me? Why nobody don't want me? Why am I not good enough? Well, the judge, after hearing this young lady's story and speaking with her, drove all the way to where this young lady was, which happens to be, if I remember correctly, I know it was North Louisiana, but I want to say Alexandria, to let her know that she was good enough, that unfortunately we had dropped the ball, and that somebody did want her. That's the kind of person we need serving in this office to serve our children, because our kids are worth it. They are our future. And I'm reminded of this old African proverb that says, how are the children? Because if the children are not well, then the community is not going to be well, and the state is not going to be well. And so we definitely have the right person in Judge Richey serving in this role and ensuring that our kids know that they are worth it, that we love them, and we're going to do whatever is necessary to help them get to be the productive citizens they have been created to be. So I'm happy to be a part of this, to me, life-changing legislation that we have placed in our state, because we do see the results already of the change that it's making, and we are looking forward that it's going to be able to bring even greater results as the judge is now going to be able to get just basic information. She just shared with me she couldn't get basic information about kids' cases because how they are sealed. And so we have worked with the judges, we work with the department, we work with everybody to make sure that there's no breach of confidentiality as it relates to getting this information, but it gives her the tools that she needs so that she can make the right decision for every child, because no one can be painted with a broad brush. Every situation is different, every situation is unique, and everyone has to be handled with those particular, I would say, kid gloves. And so with that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions, or I don't know if she comes up next, and then we take questions together. But again, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to serve the state of Louisiana, and I'm glad to serve our children.
Okay, I'm taller than the senator. I want to go through quickly this PowerPoint that will explain the duties that the enabling statute outlines for the ombudsman. First of all, the act number's wrong. It's Act 325, not 23. I don't know how that happened. But these are the activities outlined in the law for the ombudsman. One of the duties is to evaluate the delivery of services to children by any state agency or entity. There are 4 state agencies that have direct responsibility for providing services to children. That's the Department of Children and Family Services, the Department of Education, and under the Department of Education, there are 68 public school systems in the state, which would be considered entities using state funds to provide services to children. There's the Department of Education, Louisiana Department of Hospitals. LDH operates primarily through 10 human service districts that are more local and respond to a local agency, a local board that identifies and implements services for the children in that area of the state. And then, of course, the Office of Juvenile Justice. We are to periodically review the procedures that these state agencies and entities implement in order to ensure that children's rights are honored. Recently, I made a tour of a facility in Jackson Parish where there are 52 children being held, and the plan that the parish has is to put these children in what are called container units. It is essentially a tractor-trailer unit, like the 18-wheelers, and their plan is to put 6 children per container. So I'm working on that. Review complaints by persons. You can read it. And the second part of that is to be a liaison. So we receive complaints from anybody in the state and some people out of the state regarding the treatment of children. The role is to mediate for the family and for the child and act as a liaison and help families navigate these systems, these bureaucratic systems. Interestingly, I don't have any authority to change a decision that our department has made. That is the hardest thing for the complainants to understand, is that I can't change what the department's decision is. I can simply be a liaison and try to mediate on behalf of the child. This has come up more often than not in terms of child abuse and neglect investigations, when the department has determined that the allegations of abuse or neglect are either invalid or, quote, inconclusive. There is no avenue for anyone to contest that. If there is a valid finding, the perpetrator or the person against whom the allegations have been made does have a process through administrative law to challenge the finding of the department. But if the finding is either inconclusive or invalid, there is no review of that. Because of that, Senator Barrow's legislation does include, for the inconclusive determinations, a state-level review within the department to ensure that all of the investigations meet the standards that have been set and that everybody has been interviewed. I was talking with the state liaison at one point, and I said, just don't understand how anyone could read these hospital records. What had happened was a child had been suicidal, so her mom took her to the hospital. The hospital had her placed in an acute care facility, and in that facility she disclosed that her father was sexually molesting her. That disclosure was then reported. As mandatory reporters, the counselor is required to report it. And my comment was, I don't understand how anyone could read these hospital records and not have found this to be valid. And the response was, we don't have hospital records. So no one had made sure that the investigation was thorough enough to come to a conclusion that would be, for which the department could be confident. And again, on behalf of the department, they are handling a phenomenal number of cases. Last year, in 2023, there were over 51,000 reports of abuse or neglect. Those are unduplicated, but they're also one report per family. So in a case of inadequate shelter, for instance, instead of one child, there might be 5, 6, 7 children. So more than 51,000 children in this state were reported as having been the potential victim of abuse or neglect. Given that there are only 1,056,536 children in the state, that's 5% of the state's children that had a report of abuse or neglect. Of those 51,000 reported abuse or neglect cases, only 25,513 met the department's standards to open an investigation. And there are currently 4,193 kids in foster care. Interestingly, 91% of the children who are in foster care because of neglect, not because of abuse, not because of sexual abuse, not because of abandonment, but because their families can't take care of them. And for a variety of reasons. Neglect can be inadequate shelter, it can be no food for the family, it can be no housing for the family, it can be inadequate supervision if mom leaves the children while she tries to go to work and the children are too young to stay by themselves. So that is what the department is addressing on a daily basis. I think it's important to note when we talk about children that according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 23% of Louisianians are under the age of 18. So we're talking about nearly 1/4 of our population are children. And if we can't do better by our children than we have been, then that's only going to geometrically become a larger problem for the state writ large. So I didn't mean to go off on that tangent. This duty requires the Ombudsman's office to periodically review procedures. Part of the legislation going through this summer will allow the Ombuds staff to actually make announced and unannounced visits in any place where any congregate care. Now, the way this is written, it even contemplates foster homes, but I think that that may be too broad for the Ombudsman. The department certifies and vets foster homes, and so the Ombudsman's staff should not, I don't believe, be going into foster homes, but any place where there is congregate care, any residence that is a group home residence, any secure facility, any detention facility, any even PRTF, which stands for Psychiatric Residential Treatment Facility. Those facilities that the state is responsible for the individual children, I do think the Ombudsman, as an independent monitor for services, needs to be able to visit, and not only through announced visits, but even unannounced visits. Hopefully, when we get staffed up, because I will pause at this point and tell you that the Ombudsman's office was created with these broad responsibilities, and the fiscal note was one staff member. So right now, it's just me. And because of that, we have not yet posted in group home facilities and secure detention facilities any contact information. My hope is that kids themselves will contact the Ombudsman if they have issues that they believe their rights are being impaired or denied. But we are not at a capacity where we can respond to those yet. And I think that it's sometimes better to not know that there's an avenue than to reach out and not get a response. When I first started, one of the first things I started doing was writing office policies so that there would be a structure for the work of the Ombudsman. And my original thought was that I would respond to any complaint within 3 days. Well, it's now 5, and I'm struggling to get back to everybody within a business week. At this point, we have received 91 individual complaints. This is the part that I want to talk about a little bit more in a minute, and that's the recommended changes in state policies and procedures, basically recommending system reform. And this is the part that we have not done yet, and that is the public education regarding the existence of the Ombudsman and the services that the Ombudsman would provide to children and families. And again, this has been an intentional slow walking of this duty because I want the office to be able to have the capacity to respond once we broadly let the public know that this service exists. There is a special needs children category. We have been receiving complaints regarding special needs children, and I'll discuss that a little bit further in a minute. I have been serving on the Child Death Review Panel, and that is a difficult task. And then a biennial report on the conditions of confinement, a biennial in-depth report on the conditions of confinement, and then obviously a legislative report on the projects and tasks and what this office has been doing. I am required to notify the senator and representative in whose district a child dies due to abuse and neglect, and I've had the misfortune of having to make those notifications on 4 different occasions since I've been with the office. And this is just the oversight of me. At this point, we have received 91 complaints. Not counting in those 91 complaints are 2 groups of people who contacted me to discuss more broadly issues. One was a group of teachers in Washington Parish, and one was a group of foster parents in Beauregard Parish. So there are groups of people who are really concerned about the functioning of the Department of Children and Family Services specifically. Of the 91 complaints, 20 have been with the Department of Education, and specifically on special education issues. I am very disturbed because of a report that a 4-year-old special education class is being, the teacher is not certified. The teacher happens to be the bus driver, and the paraprofessionals don't give these 4-year-old special education students any water during the day so that they don't have to take them to the bathroom. So I'm very concerned that this very vulnerable population may not be not only not receiving the services they need, but maybe in situations that can be dangerous to them. One of these children has a tracheotomy, and the paraprofessional has been spoon feeding this child food, which is inconsistent with trach care. I have had some contact from autism advocates regarding medical problems that occur in school settings, so I think that it's going to be really important that we address special education and identify those areas that need policy changes and some oversight and monitoring. I have received 12 complaints of children who have received, with LDH, children who have been in acute care facilities and then nobody comes to get them. They just stay. So an acute care facility should be a 5 to 7 day stay. There's one child who's been there 7 months. And there are children who have been left until I call, and then all of a sudden things start happening. So at least one intake lady at one adolescent hospital she calls me the day the child's ready for discharge so that the child can actually be discharged within the next week. Children are left to languish, and part of that is because there are insufficient resources, insufficient step-down facilities for children who are seriously mentally ill or have serious behavioral health issues that would require a more structured and therapeutic environment. We don't have enough psychiatric residential treatment facilities. 56 of these complaints have been on DCFS. Several of them regarding investigations. The department's policy is that investigations will be concluded and closed within 30 days. I had a lady from North Louisiana call me, and she was concerned because she hadn't heard anything, and her boys had been removed, not in the system that would involve the court, but she had agreed that the 2 kids could go stay with a family member, and then it had been a long time, and she just didn't know why she couldn't have her children back. She called in January of 2024. Her children had left her home in January of 2023, and the department closed their investigation is invalid 2 days after I called. So these children were just in limbo. Recently, I had a grandmother call because the department, she felt like, wasn't giving her enough services and supports, and the department said, well, we don't have a case on that child. What happened was the court had placed, at the court hearing, the court had placed this baby, 2-year-old, with the grandma as a provisional custody pending adjudication. The department went back and closed the case, so there had been no adjudication, there had been no petition filed. So the provisional custody expired, and this child had been with her grandmother for 18 months. Grandmother did not have legal authority to even get this child medical care if she had needed it. So that was just a bureaucratic snafu that's being corrected as we speak. The issues that I have seen are not for lack of caring. I think the Special Education Administration cares about the quality of education for special education children. I think the Office of Juvenile Justice cares about the quality of services delivered and the conditions of confinement. I think DCFS cares that children are safe. And I think LDH cares that the children in the state receive the services that they need. And caring is not enough. We have to do this work. And I think that the Ombudsman's independence will hopefully allow us, once we're able to evaluate services, point out very specific system reform that will allow the agencies to perform more effectively and provide more enhanced services. The Senate Bill 145 to give us authority to look at records is critically important, because I do believe that any system reform recommendation should be data-driven. It shouldn't be anecdotal. Although I was telling Kathy Coleman, I have 6 grandparents that I'm working with because the department has their children in foster care and just will not place the children with the grandma, even though federal and state law and department policy make placement with family a priority. And they can't tell me why these grandparents don't have their grandchildren, why these children are with strangers. And another department policy is that siblings are placed together whenever possible. Siblings could be placed with grandma, but instead they're in 2 or 3 foster homes. And that uses resources that we don't have to expend. We don't have enough foster families, so while we're putting children who could be with their own family in a foster home, makes no sense. Additionally, one of the issues that I'm addressing right now is case plans being tailored to the needs of the family. One of the issues that has popped up several times is children can't go home because mom hasn't finished anger management. A mother in Lafayette, the reason the children came into care was inadequate shelter. She's addressed everything regarding the home, but they won't return the children because she hasn't had an anger management class. And she hasn't had the anger management class because there's a waiting list. And so I asked them to explain to me how her anger caused the mold that was the reason the children came out of care, because there's no reason to believe that this mom needs anger management to safely parent her children. And the response was she cussed out the caseworker. And I stopped myself before I cussed them out and said, did she hit the caseworker? Because maybe we would need to address anger if she hit the caseworker, but I would be concerned if a parent wasn't upset when you remove their child. So there's a lot of work to do. The Department of Children and Family Services will undergo the Child and Family Service Review by the Administration for Children and Families either later this year or first part of next year. And they have acknowledged, I think you may all be aware of the federal lawsuit that was filed last week alleging that DCFS has failed to provide safety and stability for children. And in that, DCFS has acknowledged, in that lawsuit, DCFS has acknowledged that they are below the national standards in many arenas. And we need to help the department address these issues. And I also know that David Matlock, with whom a person that I've known for decades, and I have utmost confidence that given the tools and support he needs, he'll be able to right the ship. It's getting the tools and resources that he needs. And additionally, I have applied for a budget that will allow me to expand the services of the Ombudsman beyond just what I can keep up with. So, but I'll answer any questions that anybody has, or for me or Senator Barrow. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask Senator Barrow if she sees any objections to this new revision and when it will be coming up on the House side.
Okay, the question for Senator Barrow is if she sees any objections to the revisions included in Senate Bill 145, the revisions to the law allowing access.
Thank you for the question. At this point, I do not. The bill did, it was amended or will be amended. And as I stated before, we've been working with all of the advocates to try to work through some of the concerns, but it flew out of the Senate, and I believe that we expect it to also fly out of the House. But one of the things that the judge did say, which I've spoken with the president of the Senate about making sure that we give them the resources, because it will serve no good if we do not give them what they need to be able to do the job that's at hand. And so one of my key goals is making sure that we fund this office properly.
So my question is, I'm referring back to an event that happened in Mississippi about 10 years ago. The case was called Olivia Y. It was DCF, that would be equivalent to their DCFS, where they got sued by the federal government. And it drew down on a document, and this is my question, how much of what's happening here would be attributed to document latency? Meaning, over there, I'm going to pull out some numbers that I seem to remember. There were 110 sort of field offices, if you will, but somebody walks into the field office, files a complaint, whatever it may be, then all that information funnel back up to headquarters, and then funnel back down, and that was a 100-day process right there. To where a whole lot of balls got dropped, and it came down to the social workers were spending, I think the number was 80% of their time at a desk, doing that versus being out in the field. Is document latency an issue, meaning technology, access, basically getting information disseminated to who it needs to get to quickly and fast?
So I'm gonna try to see if I can repeat that question. But the question, as I understand it, is that you're comparing to a lawsuit that happened in Mississippi about 10 years ago that's similar to the lawsuit that we have now about the lack of, or the time constraints that it's taking for a case to actually be open and completed from beginning to end. And it was stated during Mississippi's time that it was 100 days. Is that in essence what you was asking me? And then doing a comparison to what we are looking at here in Louisiana? Okay, so I think I got the basis of the question. I will say that I know that our caseload per person is definitely way higher than the national average. That much I do know. I don't know how much technology actually plays into them being able to do a more efficient job, but I believe that all of those are factors. And one of the things I will speak to is the fact that there was a huge cut under the General's administration to this department. Literally half of the staff was actually eliminated. And we have never been able to rebuild back up that department since. But the caseload has continued to not just grow, but almost double and triple in some cases, in some instances. So you have less staff with doubling caseload. So I believe all of those are factors. And once the lawsuit is completed, I think that we will see a huge difference. I do believe that Mr. Matlock has a commitment to ensuring that all of our kids are safe. And he has come to me and has shared with me at least 3 times the importance of making sure that we give them more for their budget so that they can really serve the children.
One question I have is, I know to some extent there's a kind of pushback from some legislators on some of the proposals that they view as being part of the current government's, package. Is this not the kind of thing that everybody should be for, in your view, regardless as to what your position is overall on criminal records and that kind of thing?
So the question is that there's been some pushback on what the part of the governor package is, and should this be a part of something that's important to everybody in the legislature? I would say that absolutely yes, and even some people that I don't agree with oftentimes have actually co-authored this legislation. So I believe that in essence, we all agree about how we provide the tools necessary to safeguard our children. The question does become, how do we fund this? Because we have to fund it. We have to fund it for the Department of Children and Family Services, because we cannot expect that a person, and this is a true life situation that I know, because I know one of the caseworkers. They have 2 people that's on call for the weekend. Every case that come up in that particular jurisdiction, they have to answer. 2 people. And it could be, I talked to one of the ladies and she was going to someone's house at 9 o'clock at night. And I was like, how safe is that? And she said, well, if I feel like I need security, I can call the police and they'll come with me. She said, but sometimes it can take the police 2 hours to get there. So we have to look at everything holistically, be realistic about it, and then fund it. Thank you. Yes, how you doing? Good to see you. Yes, sir. Miss David. No. John. Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Senator Barrow, for your work, Judge Richey, Tom, with the Catholic Council of Bishops. I was struck by the statistic that you
So the question is 91% or 93%, is it correct that 93% of the cases are from neglect? And so Judge, that's for you, so Mamusa, you can speak to that.
The latest data that I received from DCFS is that 91.3% of the children in foster care, and I can give you the number, the actual number, I think I have that with me, are in foster care due to neglect, not abuse.
And so the follow-up would be neglect could be not access to adequate housing, not adequate food, not adequate social determinants of health
Right.
that we all talk about.
It could be medical neglect.
Okay.
If a child hasn't gone to the doctor when they need to and suffer harm from that. It could be lack of supervision is considered neglect. If mom goes to work and leaves children alone because she has no other option, that could be medical neglect. This was as of April 10th, last week. There were, of the 4,161 children in foster care, 3,801 of them are there for neglect. There are 26 who have been abandoned. One was a voluntary placement because of a family crisis. 7 were maltreatment, and I think that category would be emotional maltreatment. 255 were there for physical abuse, 70 for sexual abuse, and 1 was a voluntary placement for adoption, which I believe is a safe haven baby.
Judge Richey, are those, is that data sent to you monthly?
The question is the data sent to me monthly? Well, no. They're very, very open with their data. When I ask, I get data. Some of the data I had arranged to receive, like monthly foster care counts by parish. I got when I was the director of Louisiana CASA. So some of the data I get comes through the CASA program because I had arranged to get the data previously. So, yes.
Judge Richey, first of all, I want to commend you for all the work that you've done for the children as a grandparent who's been through this. I know firsthand what you've done, and for that, we deeply thank you. My question would be, from our Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Information Center, at what point would we contact you, or what would still be the procedure if we see we have children in foster care? What would this be something that we could contact your office of one and ask the question?
The question is from Kathy Coleman with Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. At what point would a grandparent who's having difficulty either with their grandchild or getting their grandchild into their home, would they contact the ombudsman? And it's basically whenever they feel like I can help.
Judge Richey, would you mind putting that last slide up so that people
Do you know how to do that?
Barbara will.
It's on the last page. Last page.
Oh, it's on the last page of your thing. That's great. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Time for one more question.
Yeah.
Judge, well, I've been dealing with you, Regina, all my life, and a few years ago, first dealing with DCFF and my grandkids that were come from there, it was nightmare, okay? Thanks to Regina, she helped a lot, and she's gotten some of the right people. Right now, I'm reading what you're doing right now. So, any agency right now, I know that y'all moving forward because every time there's an article in the paper, that's why I'm here today too, to see what can be done, because I know the nightmares that some of these people are going through. But they can just bring this, put it in your lap. If somebody have the same trouble like we had, a lot of it had to do with workload, but a lot of it had, they just refused to even look at it, because all the people I know in my life, and I deal with government, I had people who were doing a lot of the work for them, and they wouldn't even look.
Okay,
The
so,
judge was a friend, but she couldn't get involved, but she said her hands were tied. This is in another parish. Two worst parishes, the Livingston and Neville.
Okay, so the
now,
question-
Where do you think y'all are right now? What is the biggest problem? And can you solve them problems right now with local people having the same problem we went through?
okay, so the question, as I appreciate it, is, based upon your personal experience, although some of the issues are explained by workload, some of the issues are more personal, that the agency workers may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I will say that the ombudsman's position, I think, really is two bodies of work. One is helping individuals, and the answer is at any point in the process, an individual who feels that their child's not receiving the services that are necessary for the child at any point can contact the ombudsman. The second body of work is, I think, more important in terms of systems, and that is evaluating these systems and making recommendations for system reform. One of the things, since Senator Barrow had mentioned the workload, one of the recommendations I've already made is if they're going to hire contract social workers, because they've changed their policy and you do not have to have a college degree in social work or college degree at all to be hired by DCFS, and they do some contract work, I recommended that case planning be done by licensed social workers, because that way you'll get case plans that are tailored to the needs of the family, and they'll be written by somebody who doesn't have a dog in the hunt. If the case manager is writing the case plan, the case manager has an incentive to write what they're willing to do as opposed to what the child needs. So if you had an objective licensed social worker convening the family team meeting and developing the case plan, and then the case manager gets a checklist of what to do, parents get a checklist of what to do, grandparents, if they're involved, have a checklist of what the child's needs are, then it's a lot more objective. I think part of the issues that you're describing and that I have seen are the subjective responses that agency workers may have to the individual parent or family member. Like, I don't like you, I'm gonna slow walk everything on your case, or I love you, and even though you've only been off drugs for 2 weeks, we're putting your child back with you. So those personal judgments that the DCFS caseworker makes can have massive consequences for a child. It keeps children away from families when they should go home, and it sometimes puts children back in homes too quickly.